It was supposed to be just another ordinary day for Emily. The world was slowly slipping into chaos as the infection spread like wildfire, turning her once peaceful neighborhood into a crumbling shell of what it had been. But for now, she was still safe. She had her family with her, barricaded inside their small suburban house, huddled in the only place that felt remotely secure, the basement. The sounds of groaning, growling, and pounding on the walls above were becoming unbearable. Zombies roamed the streets, mindlessly searching for any living thing to feast upon. The world had become unrecognizable, and survival was the only thing that mattered now. Emily's younger brother, Max, fidgeted nervously in the corner, his wide eyes darting from one corner of the room to the next. He was a smart kid, but the constant fear of being caught in the open was taking its toll on him. He looked to Emily for reassurance, but even she wasn't sure what to say anymore. "Emily," Max whispered, his voice barely audible over the noises from above. "What are we going to do? We're running out of food. We can't stay here forever." She tried to offer a smile, but it felt hollow. Her thoughts raced as she thought about their next move. They couldn't stay holed up forever, but every time they stepped out into the world beyond the basement, the danger grew. The infection was relentless, spreading faster than anyone had ever anticipated. And, every day, the number of zombies increased. "We'll figure something out, Max," she said, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound strong. "We just need to hold on a little longer." She glanced at her father, David, who had been the rock of the family throughout the chaos. But even his once unwavering confidence had begun to show cracks. His eyes, usually full of life, now seemed haunted by the world outside. Emily could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Then, a noise from above cut through her thoughts. It wasn't the usual groaning or crashing. It was a thump, a heavy thump, followed by the unmistakable sound of something being dragged across the floor. "Dad, what was that?" Emily asked, her heart skipping a beat. David's eyes widened as he stood up quickly, moving to the top of the stairs that led to the ground floor. He paused for a moment, listening intently. The noise continued, faint but persistent. "I don't know," he muttered. "But I'm going to check it out. Stay here. Lock the door behind me." Emily wanted to argue, but she knew it would be pointless. Her father had always been the protector, and no matter how dangerous it got, he wasn't going to hide away. He slowly ascended the stairs, and Emily could hear him moving carefully, cautiously, trying to avoid making any noise. For a moment, she heard nothing. Then, there was a loud crash. "Dad!" Emily screamed, her heart pounding in her chest. She grabbed Max's arm tightly, pulling him toward the door to the basement. "We need to go, now." But before they could make it to the door, they heard it, a low growl, followed by more crashing sounds. And then, the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, scraping against metal. "What is that?" Max asked, his voice trembling in fear. Emily's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The door to the basement, the one that had always been securely locked, was being rattled. Someone, or something, was on the other side, trying to get in. But it didn't sound like a typical zombie. It was something different. With trembling hands, Emily pulled Max back, her mind racing. There was no time to think. The basement door had always been a symbol of safety for them, the one place that had kept them hidden from the chaos outside. But now, it seemed like it was no longer the sanctuary they thought it was. She motioned for Max to stay silent, and together, they crouched low to the ground, waiting for the sound to subside. But it didn't. It grew louder, closer. The growling was joined by something else now, a scraping noise, like metal against wood. "Emily, what's happening?" Max whispered, his voice shaking with fear. "I don't know," she whispered back, her breath shallow. "But we have to stay quiet. Don't move." Suddenly, there was a loud crash, and the door shuttered violently. The lock, the simple mechanism that had kept them safe for so long, was beginning to give way. It was in that moment, as the door cracked open just a fraction, that Emily saw it. A symbol, scratched into the wood. It was barely visible, but it was enough to make her heart stop. A symbol she had seen before. The door, the forgotten door, held the key to their survival. But what lay beyond it, what had been hiding there all along, was something far more dangerous than any zombie they had ever encountered. The lock was only the beginning. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the door cracked open just a sliver. The scraping sound continued, louder now, as if whatever was on the other side was trying to force its way through. Max clung to her side, his small body trembling. She could feel his fear radiating through him, and for the first time, she was unsure how much longer they could stay hidden. The symbol on the door, a faint, almost forgotten etching, was burned into Emily's mind. It had been there for years, long before the outbreak. She remembered seeing it as a child, when her parents had told her never to go near that door. They had never explained why, only that it was a part of the house that should remain untouched. Emily never questioned it, assuming it was just a quirk of the old house. But now, with the door rattling violently, she realized that the symbol meant something far more important. Max's soft whisper broke through the tension. "What's happening, Emily? What's behind that door?" Emily didn't know how to answer him. The truth was, she didn't know what was behind it either. All she knew was that it was dangerous, and it was somehow tied to their survival. The forgotten door, with its strange markings, was no longer just a part of the house, it had become a lifeline, one they couldn't afford to ignore. The rattling intensified. The lock was beginning to give way, the sound of metal straining under pressure ringing through the basement. Emily moved quickly, her mind racing for a solution. She had to keep them safe, and she couldn't let whatever was behind that door get through. The basement was their last refuge. If the door opened completely, everything they had worked so hard to protect would be lost. Max's hand gripped hers tightly as she crouched down beside the door, trying to steady her breath. She scanned the basement, looking for anything they could use to reinforce the door. Her eyes landed on a pile of old furniture in the corner. There were chairs, a bookshelf, and a heavy wooden table. If she could barricade the door with them, it might buy them some time. But then she remembered something. The lock. The symbol. The forgotten door. There had to be something they were missing. Something important. "Max," Emily said quietly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I need you to stay right here, okay? Don't move." Max nodded, his face pale with fear but his trust in her unwavering. Emily stood up and moved to the pile of furniture, trying to think quickly. As she picked up a chair, her mind kept returning to the symbol on the door. Why had it been there? What had it meant? Suddenly, it hit her. The lock. The symbol. It wasn't just a mark. It was a clue. Emily rushed over to the door, her heart racing as she inspected the lock. It wasn't a typical lock, there was something strange about it. The mechanism had a hidden compartment, barely visible, embedded in the wood. She ran her fingers along the edges, feeling for any kind of release. She didn't know what she was looking for, but something inside her told her that the key to surviving what was coming lay within that very lock. Max's voice cut through the silence. "Emily, what are you doing?" "I'm trying to figure this out," she replied, her voice tight with determination. "Stay back. This could be dangerous." She pressed harder, her fingers tracing the markings, until she felt a slight shift. A hidden button clicked under her fingertips, and the lock released with a faint, metallic snap. The door shifted, just slightly, enough to reveal a hidden compartment within the frame. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she reached for the compartment, her fingers trembling as she pulled out a small, rusted key. The key was simple, nothing remarkable about it at first glance. It looked ancient, worn down by time, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was the missing piece, the very thing they needed to survive. "Emily, what is that?" Max asked again, his voice a mixture of confusion and fear. "I think it's the key," Emily said quietly. "The key to this door. The key to everything." Before she could say more, the door rattled again, the growling noise louder than ever. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The sound was growing more frantic, more desperate. It wasn't just one zombie anymore, it sounded like there were dozens. And they were getting closer. She didn't have much time. Taking a deep breath, Emily inserted the rusted key into the lock. She turned it slowly, feeling a slight resistance before it clicked into place. The door creaked open, inch by inch, and the noise from the other side grew deafening. With one final push, the door swung open completely. But what Emily saw on the other side was not what she expected. Instead of a horde of zombies, the door led to a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were lined with old wooden panels, covered in dust and decay. And at the far end of the hallway, there was another door, one that was completely sealed shut, as though it had never been opened in centuries. Emily's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a basement. It was a hidden part of the house, one that had been sealed away, locked up, for reasons she couldn't yet understand. "Emily," Max whispered, his voice filled with awe. "What is this place?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "But I think we've just found our way out." Emily's heart raced as she stepped cautiously into the dark hallway beyond the forgotten door. The musty smell of old wood and stagnant air filled her nostrils, a stark contrast to the tension in her chest. The basement door, now behind her, had once been a symbol of safety, but the hidden corridor before her felt like the unknown, a place of potential danger and mystery. Max's footsteps echoed softly as he followed her, his hand still gripping hers. He was barely a whisper behind, his eyes wide with wonder and fear. "What is this place, Emily? Where does this lead?" Emily didn't have an answer. She had no idea what lay ahead. The house had always been strange, old and full of hidden corners and forgotten rooms, but this passage was something different. It had been sealed for a reason, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the key she had found was only the beginning of something much bigger. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by a few flickering bulbs, the light struggling to push back the shadows that clung to the walls. The wooden panels were weathered, their edges worn with age, and every step they took seemed to bring them deeper into a forgotten part of the house. The silence was oppressive, almost suffocating, except for the soft shuffle of their feet. Max's voice broke through the quiet. "What if there are more zombies here? What if this was a trap?" Emily shook her head, her thoughts in turmoil. "I don't think so, Max. This doesn't feel like a trap. It's something else." She wasn't sure why she felt so certain, but there was something about the key, the way it had fit perfectly into the lock, that made her believe this was the right path. Whatever secrets this part of the house held, it had to be important. And if it offered a chance at survival, then it was worth exploring. The passageway seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually, they reached the far end. There, in the darkness, was another door. This one, however, was different. Unlike the old basement door, this one was sturdy, reinforced with iron, its edges sharp and unyielding. It was sealed shut, its surface smooth and impenetrable. There were no markings, no symbols to hint at its purpose. Just a solid, unbreakable barrier. Emily stopped in her tracks, staring at the door. It was far more formidable than the one they had just passed through. And the eerie silence around them seemed to grow thicker, as though the entire house was holding its breath. "What do we do now?" Max asked, his voice barely audible. He seemed smaller somehow, his earlier confidence fading as they stared at the door. Emily stepped closer, her hand still gripping the rusted key. She knew that this door, like the first, must have a way to open. It had to. She glanced around, searching for any sign, any clue that might tell her how to unlock it. There were no obvious locks or mechanisms, but as her eyes scanned the door, something caught her attention. In the faint light, she noticed a tiny indentation in the wood, just above the handle. It wasn't much, a small groove that seemed out of place. Her fingers brushed against it, and a chill ran through her. Max shifted nervously behind her. "What are you doing, Emily?" Emily didn't answer. She was too focused on the indentation. She pressed her finger into it, feeling a slight give, as if the door itself was reacting to her touch. Then, with a soft click, the surface of the door shifted, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the wood. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Inside the compartment was another object, an old, tarnished medallion. The medallion was etched with the same symbol that had appeared on the basement door, the symbol she had noticed earlier. It was the same, but this time, the symbol seemed to glow faintly, as though it held some kind of energy. "Emily," Max whispered, his voice full of awe. "What is that?" "I think this is the key," Emily replied, her voice trembling. "It's not just the lock, it's the medallion. This is what we've been looking for." Max stepped closer, eyes wide. "What do we do with it?" Emily looked back at the door, uncertainty creeping into her mind. "I don't know yet, but I have a feeling it's the answer." The medallion felt heavy in her hand, its cold surface pressing against her palm. She turned it over, searching for any markings or clues that might help her understand its purpose. But there was nothing, just the faint glow of the symbol. "Emily, I don't like this," Max said, his voice shaking. "What if we're walking right into danger?" She turned to him, her face softening. "I know it's scary, Max. But I don't think we have a choice. We have to know what's behind this door." She took a deep breath and raised the medallion to the door. The instant the cold metal touched the surface, the door began to hum, as though it were alive. The glow from the medallion intensified, and the once impenetrable door seemed to shudder in response. Emily stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest as the door slowly creaked open. What lay beyond was a mystery, but one thing was certain: the forgotten door, the lock, the medallion, they were all part of something much bigger than she had realized. And whatever was on the other side, it was a part of their survival. The door finally swung open, revealing a vast, dark room. The air was stale, thick with dust, and the only sound was the faintest whisper of wind. But as Emily's eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw something in the far corner of the room that made her blood run cold. A figure, motionless, standing in the shadows. It wasn't a zombie. It was something else entirely. Emily's pulse raced as her eyes locked onto the figure standing motionless in the corner of the room. At first, she thought it might have been another survivor, someone who had been trapped just like them. But something about the way it stood there, unnaturally still, made her doubt that assumption. The room beyond the door was massive, its high ceiling lost in the shadows. The walls were covered in layers of dust and cobwebs, and old furniture was scattered haphazardly across the floor. It looked like a storage room, abandoned long before the outbreak had ever begun. Yet, in the far corner, the figure remained perfectly still, as if waiting for them. "Emily, what is that?" Max whispered, his voice trembling. He gripped her hand tighter, his fear palpable. "I don't know," she replied, her own voice strained with uncertainty. "But stay close. We need to be careful." Her mind raced. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It stood just out of the reach of the dim light, hidden in the deepest shadows of the room. Emily could just make out its outline, a tall, thin shape, draped in what looked like tattered clothing. Its face was obscured, hidden in the darkness, but Emily had an unsettling feeling deep in her gut. The figure felt wrong. "Maybe it's a survivor," Max suggested, though his voice betrayed his doubt. "Someone who got trapped in here." Emily wanted to believe that, but the longer she stared, the less convinced she became. Survivors didn't stand perfectly still like that. Survivors moved, breathed, reacted. This figure, it wasn't reacting at all. The quiet was oppressive, as if the very air around them had thickened. Every instinct screamed at Emily to turn around, to leave the room and find another way. But she couldn't. The door behind them had shut with a soft, ominous thud, and there was no way to go back. They had no choice but to move forward. Max took a tentative step forward. "Emily, should we try to talk to it?" "No," she said firmly, pulling him back. "We don't know what it is. It could be dangerous." But just as she said that, the figure moved. The sound was faint, a soft rustling in the shadows, but it was enough to make Emily freeze. The figure shifted slightly, its head turning ever so slowly toward them. A low, rasping sound filled the air, as if it were breathing, but not in any natural way. It was too slow, too strained. Emily's throat tightened, her hand instinctively tightening around the medallion. She felt a surge of cold dread wash over her as the figure took a step forward, the faint light revealing more of its form. It was tall, impossibly thin, with long limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Its face, when it finally emerged from the darkness, was pale, almost ghostly, with hollow, sunken eyes. Its mouth hung open slightly, as if it had forgotten how to speak, or perhaps never knew how to in the first place. "Max," Emily whispered urgently, backing away slowly. "Stay behind me." Max was trembling, his eyes wide with fear as he clung to his sister's side. "What is it?" "It looks like..." "Not a zombie," Emily said quietly, her voice tight. "But it's not a person either. Whatever it is, we need to get out of here." The creature took another slow, deliberate step forward. Its eyes seemed to fixate on Emily, as though it recognized her, or perhaps was simply drawn to the medallion she still clutched in her hand. The glow of the medallion flickered in the dim light, casting eerie reflections off the creature's pallid skin. Emily's mind raced. The figure wasn't human, it wasn't a zombie. It was something entirely different, something that shouldn't be here. She had read about experiments, strange government projects, and secret organizations that might have been involved in the outbreak, but nothing had prepared her for this. Then, the creature spoke. Its voice was soft, almost a whisper, but there was something chilling about it. "You found the key." Emily froze, her blood running cold. The creature knew about the key. It knew about the medallion. "What are you?" Emily asked, her voice shaking despite her best effort to remain calm. The creature's lips parted in a twisted smile, and the faint glow of its eyes seemed to brighten, as if responding to her question. It stepped forward again, closer now, and Emily instinctively pulled Max behind her. She wasn't sure what this thing wanted, but she knew it wasn't good. "I am the gatekeeper," it rasped, its voice low and guttural, like a broken machine trying to speak. "You have unlocked the door. The door you were never meant to open." Emily's mind raced. The gatekeeper. She had no idea what it meant, but the words felt ominous, like a warning. "Why are you here?" she demanded. "What do you want?" The gatekeeper tilted its head slightly, as though considering her question. "I am bound to this place," it said slowly. "I guard the way." The key is your only chance." "Chance for what?" Emily pressed, trying to make sense of the cryptic message. The gatekeeper's hollow eyes glimmered with an eerie light. "Survival. Escape. You are not the first to come seeking answers. Many have come before you, and failed." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Failed? What was this thing talking about? What had happened to those who had tried to unlock the door before? Before she could ask more, the gatekeeper made a sound, a low, chilling growl, and its bony hand extended toward her, the fingers twitching as though it wanted to take the medallion from her. Emily instinctively backed away, clutching the medallion tightly to her chest. "We need to go, Emily," Max shouted, pulling at her arm, his voice cracking with fear. "Now." The gatekeeper's hand froze, its eyes narrowing as if it were contemplating their next move. The air grew thicker, heavier, and Emily could feel the room closing in around them. It was clear that they were no longer in control. The gatekeeper's smile twisted again as it stepped back into the shadows. "Then run," it whispered. "But remember, the door is always open." With that, the figure melted back into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Emily and Max alone in the eerie silence. "Emily, what just happened?" Max breathed, looking up at her in shock. Emily could only stare at the now empty corner where the gatekeeper had stood, her heart still pounding in her chest. Whatever it was, it hadn't been human. But it had given them a choice. And that choice would shape everything that came next. The door behind them had opened, but the truth that lay beyond it was far darker than they could have imagined. Emily could still hear the faint rasping of the gatekeeper's voice echoing in her mind. "The door is always open." What did it mean? And what was that thing? It wasn't a zombie, nor a survivor, it was something else entirely. Something tied to the house, to the lock, and to the strange medallion she held in her hand. Max's grip on her arm tightened, and his voice quivered. We can't stay here, Emily. We need to leave. That thing, it's not safe. She could feel his fear in every word, and for the first time, doubt crept into her own thoughts. But she couldn't ignore the feeling, the nagging sense that the gatekeeper had been right. The door had been opened for a reason, and the medallion had a purpose she had yet to understand. Leaving now wouldn't solve anything, it would only delay the inevitable. We have to keep going, Emily said, her voice more determined than she felt. She gave Max a reassuring squeeze, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to comfort. Whatever that thing was, it was guarding something. And I don't think it was just the door. We need to know what's behind it. Max shook his head, panic flashing in his eyes. Emily, please. It's not safe. We don't even know what we're dealing with here. That thing, whatever it was, it's not human. Emily looked at the closed door behind them, the same one that had opened at the touch of the medallion. The medallion that seemed to pulse with a strange energy in her palm. She couldn't explain it, but deep down, she knew that the key, the door, the gatekeeper, they were all connected. And as terrifying as it was, she couldn't back away now. Max, I know you're scared. I am too, she said softly. But we can't let fear control us. We need answers. She glanced at the door before them again, the path forward still shrouded in mystery. But the key had led them here. The gatekeeper had pointed them towards something, and Emily couldn't ignore it. The answers they needed were beyond that door. With a deep breath, Emily stepped forward. Max hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly followed. The room felt colder now, the air thicker with an unnatural tension. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. As they moved closer to the door, the medallion seemed to hum in her hand, its faint glow flickering with intensity. Max stopped just behind her. What if we're not supposed to be here? What if we're opening something worse than we can handle? I don't know, Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But we don't have a choice. We've come this far. And there's no turning back. She placed her hand on the door handle, feeling its cool, solid surface. The moment her fingers brushed the metal, the hum of the medallion grew louder, vibrating against her palm. The door shuddered, as if it were responding to her touch, to the presence of the key. The faintest click echoed in the room, and the door creaked open on its own. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The darkness beyond the door seemed to stretch out infinitely, swallowing any trace of light. It was as though they were on the edge of something vast, a void waiting to consume them. She couldn't see anything, couldn't even make out the shape of the room beyond. The air smelled damp and stale, with an odd metallic tang she couldn't quite place. Emily. I don't like this, Max said, his voice barely audible. Please, we can't go in there. But Emily didn't answer. She was already stepping through the door, guided by an unseen force, a strange pull that seemed to draw her forward. She couldn't explain it, but she had to keep moving. She had to uncover whatever secret the house was hiding. The key had opened the door. Now, it was time to walk through it. Max reluctantly followed, his footsteps hesitant, but he didn't voice his protests again. They were in this together now, no matter how terrifying it became. The darkness beyond the door was suffocating. They moved slowly, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness, until the sound of their own breathing was the only thing they could hear. Emily's eyes adjusted slowly, but there was nothing to see, just more blackness. The walls seemed to close in as they continued, and the air grew thicker, colder. Then, in the far distance, she saw something. A flicker of light. Barely perceptible, but enough to grab her attention. Do you see that? She whispered to Max, her voice tight. Max squinted into the darkness, his eyes struggling to adjust. I don't see anything. But then the light flickered again, this time more distinctly, like the glimmer of a candle or a torch in the distance. Emily didn't wait for Max to say another word. She moved toward it, drawn to it as though it were a beacon. The further they walked, the closer the light seemed to get. It was a faint, eerie glow, but it was enough to pierce the darkness. As they neared it, the source of the light came into focus, a small, flickering candle sitting atop a pedestal in the center of the room. The candle's flame was unnaturally steady, casting sharp shadows on the walls around them. And as Emily reached the pedestal, she saw something else, engraved into the stone. Beneath the candle was a symbol. A symbol that looked almost identical to the one on the medallion. "Emily," Max's voice cracked. "What is this place?" "I don't know," Emily whispered. She bent down to examine the symbol more closely, the medallion still glowing faintly in her hand. "But I think we're about to find out." As she traced her fingers over the engraving, the floor beneath them suddenly trembled, and the walls seemed to shift, closing in. The light from the candle flared brightly, and the air grew colder, suffocating, as though something in the house had awoken. A deep, rumbling voice echoed through the chamber, though there was no one there. "You have come. Now, you will face what lies beyond the gate." Before Emily could react, the floor beneath them cracked open, revealing a hidden pit that seemed to stretch into nothingness. The medallion in her hand burned hotter than ever before, its light blinding in the encroaching darkness. And then, with a sudden pull, they were falling. The world spun as Emily and Max tumbled into the abyss. The air rushed past them, cold and sharp, like 1,000 invisible knives slicing through their skin. Emily instinctively reached out, trying to grasp onto something, anything, to slow their fall. But there was nothing. Only the feeling of weightlessness and the sound of their own panicked breathing. Max's terrified screams echoed through the darkness, but they seemed to be swallowed by the vast, empty space around them. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as her mind raced. What had just happened? Where were they going? The room, the light, the strange symbol, it all seemed like a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. Her body twisted as she fell, and she could feel herself being pulled towards something, some unseen force that was dragging her deeper into the void. The light from the medallion flickered, casting strange, erratic shadows on the walls of the abyss. "Emily!" Max's voice reached her again, strained with fear. "What's happening? Where are we going?" "I don't know," she screamed back, but her words were lost in the rush of wind. It felt like they were falling forever, the fall stretching into an endless descent. Every time she thought they might hit the ground, the darkness seemed to deepen, and they kept falling further. Suddenly, a hard jolt broke the continuous falling. Emily gasped as her feet hit something solid. She landed roughly, her knees buckling under the shock of impact, and Max crashed down beside her. The fall hadn't been as far as she'd expected, but the landing had been brutal. For a moment, everything was still. Emily lay on her back, gasping for air, her heart pounding as her body adjusted to the shock. The air here felt different, still and oppressive, with a strange, metallic taste in her mouth. She could hear Max groaning beside her, trying to sit up, but his voice was thick with pain. "You okay?" Emily whispered, reaching out to help him up. Max winced but nodded, though his eyes were wide with terror. "I think so." "What just happened? Where are we?" Emily stood up slowly, her body still aching from the fall, and scanned their surroundings. The air was thick with dust, and everything around them was bathed in a dim, unsettling light. The room they were in was vast, much larger than anything they had encountered in the house so far. The walls were made of the same stone as the pedestal with the candle, but they were rougher, older. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, covered in cracked stone and moss. There was no sign of the door they had just passed through, no trace of the path they had come from. They had been dropped into this place as though by force, as though this was where they were always meant to end up. Max took a tentative step forward. "What is this place?" Emily looked around, trying to make sense of the scene. A strange, haunting silence filled the room. There were no windows, no obvious exits, just a cavernous space that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The light from the medallion was the only illumination, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. And then she saw it, something in the far distance. At first, it looked like a wall, a smooth surface stretching across the room. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized it wasn't a wall at all. It was a massive door, one that looked identical to the one they had passed through earlier. But this door was unlike any they had seen before. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings, the same symbol that had been on the medallion, the same symbol she had seen earlier in the room with the candle. Max followed her gaze and gasped. "Is that another door?" Emily nodded slowly, her stomach churning with a mix of fear and curiosity. "It looks like it, but this one feels different. Something is off about it." She took a step forward, feeling the medallion pulse again, this time with a stronger intensity. It was as if the door was calling to her, beckoning her closer, urging her to unlock it. Emily couldn't explain why, but she felt compelled to approach it, to see what lay beyond. As they neared the door, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble slightly. At first, it was barely noticeable, a subtle vibration in the stone. But then, the tremors grew stronger, and a low hum filled the air. It was the same sound she had heard when the gatekeeper had spoken, the same noise that had resonated deep in her chest. The source of the noise seemed to be coming from the door itself. "Emily." "I don't like this," Max whispered, his voice cracking. He was standing several feet behind her now, his fear mounting with every step she took toward the door. "I know," she said, though she didn't stop. "But we have to see what's on the other side. We need to understand what's happening." The closer they got, the more intense the vibrations became. The air grew heavier, thicker, as though it were alive with energy. Emily could feel the medallion growing warmer in her hand, the glow now pulsing like a heartbeat. She reached out to touch the door, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the stone. The moment she made contact, the door groaned, a deep, resonant sound that shook the entire room. Max let out a sharp breath. "Emily, don't." But it was too late. The moment her fingers made contact with the door, the carvings on its surface began to shift. The stone seemed to come alive, the patterns twisting and changing in ways that defied logic. The symbol on the door, identical to the one on the medallion, glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the medallion's light. And then, with a loud crack, the door began to open. A rush of air, cold and sharp, poured out from beyond the door, swirling around them. Emily staggered back, but she couldn't look away. The door was wide open now, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. But this darkness was different. It wasn't the same oppressive blackness they had seen before. This was a deeper, more ancient kind of darkness, a void that seemed to stretch on forever. And within it, something stirred. Emily's heart raced as she realized they were no longer alone. A faint whisper reached her ears, like a soft breath carried by the wind. "Welcome to the other side." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The whisper felt like it had come from within her own mind, as though the very air around them was alive and sentient. Max froze beside her, his face pale with terror. They were standing on the threshold of something far beyond their understanding, and the eerie voice had made it clear, they weren't alone. The air was unnaturally still, heavy with an unspoken threat. Emily's hand trembled as she clutched the medallion, its pulse now erratic, almost frantic. It was as if it too felt the presence of something dangerous on the other side of the door. Max took a cautious step backward, his eyes wide with panic. "What is this place, Emily? It's like we're not supposed to be here, like we're trespassing in something ancient." Emily didn't answer immediately. She couldn't, her mind was still reeling, trying to process the events that had unfolded. The fall, the door, the medallion, and now, this whispering darkness beyond the threshold. But the sense of dread that gripped her heart wasn't enough to make her turn away. If anything, it was a call to action, urging her to step forward. The door had been opened for a reason. She had the key. She had to see this through. "I don't know," Emily said quietly, her voice barely audible above the deafening silence. "But I think we have to go in. There's something here, something important." Max's eyes flickered to the dark expanse beyond the door, his body tense, ready to bolt at the slightest movement. "I'm not so sure, Emily. We've already seen things we can't explain." That voice, it wasn't just a whisper. It felt like it was calling us. The hairs on the back of Emily's neck stood up. She had felt it too, the weight of that presence, watching them, guiding them in. The voice had been soft, almost soothing, but there was an underlying menace. It had a power to it, an ancient, unyielding force. She couldn't ignore it, even if every instinct told her to run. "I don't think it's calling us," Emily said, her tone firm but cautious. "I think it's warning us. But we don't have much of a choice, Max. We're already here. We need to understand what's going on." Max hesitated, his eyes flicking between her and the door. "I don't like it. This place feels wrong, Emily. It's not just dark, it's like something is watching us, waiting." As if on cue, a shadow moved in the darkness beyond the door. A flicker, just a glimpse of something shifting, and then it was gone. Emily gasped, her heart racing. Whatever it was, it hadn't been human. It was too quick, too unnatural. She couldn't make out its form, but she felt its presence clearly. "Did you see that?" Emily whispered, her voice shaky. Max nodded, his face drained of color. "I did." "What was that?" That wasn't a zombie, was it?" Emily shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving the darkness. "No. I don't think that was a zombie. This is something else. Something older." Max swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "I don't think we should go any further." But Emily didn't move. She couldn't. The door had been opened, and the medallion in her hand seemed to call her forward. Its light was pulsing again, brighter now, as though it was reacting to whatever lay beyond the threshold. With one last glance at Max, who was still standing frozen at the doorway, Emily stepped forward. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the temperature around her dropped sharply. The air felt frigid, as though the very fabric of reality had shifted. A thick, inky darkness enveloped her, making it nearly impossible to see even a few inches in front of her face. Max stepped forward reluctantly, his voice barely audible. "Emily, this isn't right. We shouldn't." But Emily couldn't hear him anymore. The darkness swallowed his words, leaving only the hum of the medallion. The deeper they walked into this place, the more the whispers grew, now more distinct, echoing around them from unseen corners. It wasn't just one voice anymore, there were dozens, hundreds, overlapping in a chorus of whispers. "Welcome," one voice whispered. "Escape," another voice hissed. "Run," came a third, a warning like a sharp breath in the back of her neck. But there was one voice that stood out, rising above the others. The voice that had spoken to them before, the voice that had guided them here. "You have come far, Emily," it said, its tone both knowing and sinister. "But you are not alone. The door has many guardians, and they will test you." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. The air grew denser, heavier, as though the weight of the room was pressing in on her from every side. "What do you want from us?" Emily shouted, her voice cracking with fear. "Why are we here?" The voice chuckled softly, sending chills down her spine. "What you seek, you cannot yet understand. But the door will reveal its secrets, in time. But be warned, Emily, for every answer has its price." Suddenly, the ground trembled again, this time far more violently. The floor beneath her cracked, and a sharp, bone-rattling screech filled the air as the walls began to warp. The stone shifted, groaning as if it were alive, and with a loud bang, a massive, shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall, towering over them, with eyes that gleamed like burning coals in the pitch-black void. Its shape was distorted, barely human, with limbs that were long and twisted. Its mouth opened, and a horrible, guttural growl rumbled from deep within its chest. The figure took a step forward, its enormous form casting a terrifying shadow over Emily and Max. Max screamed, his voice rising in panic. "We need to get out of here." But there was nowhere to run. The shadow loomed closer, and the air seemed to grow even colder, as though time itself had slowed. "You have entered the realm of the forgotten," the voice intoned, echoing through the darkness. And now, you must face the guardians. The figure raised one enormous hand, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. It was time to face what lay beyond the door. Max grabbed her arm, pulling her back. We have to go now, Emily. But it was too late. The shadow lunged. The monstrous shadow lunged at them with terrifying speed, its hulking form a blur in the dim light of the medallion. Emily's heart skipped a beat as the air seemed to crackle with an electric charge. She barely had time to react before Max pulled her roughly to the side, dragging her away from the figure's swiping claws. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the shadow's immense footfall caused the stone floor to crack even further. Max's breathing was erratic, his panic palpable. Emily, we need to get out of here. We can't fight this thing. I know, she gasped, pulling herself up with Max's help. They had barely enough time to recover before the creature's other clawed hand swung toward them. Emily shoved Max out of the way just as the shadow's enormous hand scraped the stone where he'd been standing, sending chunks of debris flying. The medallion's light was growing brighter, pulsing erratically as if it were reacting to the danger. Emily held it tightly, the warmth of it seeping into her hand. She wasn't sure why, but she felt that the medallion was the key to surviving this. If only she could figure out how to use it. The shadow was relentless, circling them, its eyes burning with malevolent energy. It moved like a predator, waiting for the right moment to strike, the air heavy with tension. Emily's mind raced as she looked around for anything that could help them, anything that could give them a chance. But there was nothing. No weapons, no escape route. Just them, the shadow, and the crushing silence that felt like a living, breathing entity. A voice, deep and resonant, broke through the chaos, the voice that had spoken to them earlier. There is no escape. Not for you, not for anyone who enters this realm. The guardians will never let you leave. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. The weight of the words settled over her like a shroud, and she felt the cold fingers of hopelessness curl around her chest. What did that mean? Was there truly no way out? Max stumbled to his feet, panic overtaking his features. Emily, we need to find another way out, or we'll be trapped here forever. Please. She looked at him, her breath shallow. For a moment, the weight of the situation almost crushed her. But then, something shifted. The medallion, its light flickering wildly now, seemed to hum with energy. It wasn't just light anymore. It felt alive. As though it was trying to communicate something to her. To show her something. Max took a step forward, his voice desperate. Emily, what are you thinking? Don't. But she wasn't listening. She raised the medallion high above her head, and a strange force seemed to draw the creature's attention. The shadow stopped moving, its burning eyes locking onto the medallion with an unsettling intensity. The voice echoed once more, but this time it was different. It was softer, almost pleading. The key. The medallion. You must understand it. Only with its power can you break the curse. Suddenly, everything clicked. The shadow wasn't attacking them because it wanted to kill them, it was trying to prevent them from breaking the curse that had bound this place. It was a guardian, protecting the secrets of the door, protecting whatever lay behind it. Max was staring at her in confusion, but Emily didn't have time to explain. She stepped forward, her heart racing. She focused all her energy on the medallion, willing it to unlock the truth. A strange sensation washed over her, a rush of energy, and in that moment, everything changed. The medallion flared to life, glowing so brightly it nearly blinded them both. The shadows that had once seemed so imposing began to flicker, dissolving into wisps of smoke. The voice, no longer ominous, now carried a tone of finality. You have unlocked the truth. The curse can be broken. As the light from the medallion intensified, the shadow let out an earth-shattering roar, its form disintegrating into the air like dust in the wind. The tremors in the ground ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, leaving only an eerie silence behind. Max, still reeling from the chaos, took a hesitant step forward. Emily, what just happened? Emily's chest was heaving with exertion, but a strange sense of relief washed over her. I think we did it. I think we broke whatever was keeping us here. The door wasn't just a door, it was a prison. And the medallion was the key to unlocking it. They both turned back toward the door, which was still standing open, its surface now calm and untouched. The darkness beyond had receded, leaving a faint glow that illuminated a long, winding path that seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. The path beyond the door was no longer terrifying, it was inviting, almost peaceful. The voice spoke once more, this time without threat or malice, but with a sense of resignation. You have faced the Guardians and proven your worth. The door is open, but your journey does not end here. Max looked at Emily, confusion still in his eyes. What do we do now? Emily looked at him, her face determined. Now we move forward. The world beyond this door is waiting. And we're going to find the answers. Together. With that, they took the first step through the open door, the light from the medallion leading the way. The silence that had filled the room was now broken, replaced by a sense of hope, a sense of possibility. They had broken through, survived the darkness, and now they were free to discover what lay on the other side. As they walked, the door slowly began to close behind them, its ancient frame sealing shut with a finality that was both reassuring and unsettling. But whatever lay ahead, Emily and Max knew one thing for certain, their survival had only just begun. And their journey was far from over.